Hello, hello. Welcome back. Thoughtful Tuesday with Johnny Tiger. Finally, we are getting at the missing Soul Search Sunday. 2 days late, but hey, better late than never. Today's date is February 15, 2022. Quick announcement before we start. As of next week, the Johnny Tiger Daily Video will be going on hiatus for about a month. We'll be back in production in April, and everything will go back to normal. However, I am not going to be idle, even though nothing will be produced. Well, I shouldn't be say nothing. Maybe something will, but I right now I'm planning on not producing anything for about a month. Reason being, there's a lot of videos on this channel, and it's getting harder and harder for some people to find older materials that's already there. So I'm going to take this month to do some behind the scene organizing and putting things into playlist so you guys can uh, access some of those older information easier, and hopefully this will make it a little bit less unwieldy to follow and enjoy this channel. I am going to announce this a few more times on this week's videos, so excuse me, some of you may get a little bit bored of hearing about this, but I want everybody to be on the same page. I don't want people to start sending me emails and messages and say, "Hey, is everything okay? How come you're not producing videos?" Uh, this is why. Okay, if you watch this week's video, you will know. Last week, I was reading a book and I saw this little passage that really made me thoughtful. I tend to be a very thoughtful person for the most part, although my beautiful, intelligent girlfriend, Kitten, may dispute that sometime. But anyway, the passage goes quite often the moment of our life that we feel very happy in will turn out to be memories that we don't want to remember. And sometimes those moments that things feel unbearable, things feel horrible, will turn out to be some of the fondest memory later. So there's no point dwelling too much on what's going on because later you may look back upon it and feel completely different. Now, I must be some kind of a freak or unusual breed or something. Johnny Tiger is usually very in the moment. When I say in the moment, I'm talking about that when I eat, I'm all in my sensories, my concentrations. I'm like a thoughtless eating machine when I'm eating. I can barely carry on a conversation when I'm eating because I'm enjoying the texture of the food, the flavor, thinking about how good this feels. When I take a shower, it's kind of the same thing. I very rarely think about things in the shower. I'm so overwhelmed with the texture, the feel, the temperature, and how good this is feeling. And this extends to a lot of the things I do when I'm training, when I'm exercising, when I'm making videos. When I'm making these videos, I'm almost on complete autopilot. Like people say, "Wow, you talk so much about things. Do you script them?" No, I don't. I sometimes, like today, I am pretty much just opening my mouth and let things go and let things flow. So Johnny Tiger has always been a very kind of in the moment kind of person. So I very rarely miss my cue on how things should feel at any certain given time. So very rarely do I ever look back and say, "Oh, that felt horrible at the time, but now thinking back, it wasn't so bad." No, if I felt horrible at the time, I'm going to remember it 10 years later, and it's still going to be horrible. Uh, I very rarely look back at something and said, "Oh, that kind of was exciting at the time, but thinking back, it wasn't so cool." No, usually if I enjoyed it at the time, I'm going to enjoy the memory of it for the rest of my life. So uh, maybe I'm a little bit of a rare personality when it comes to that. However, I do, I am able to relate to that little passage sort of vicariously because it reminds me of something a friend, a really good friend, said to me once. We'll just call this friend K because I want to protect his anonymity and just in case. Although there's really nothing to protect, I don't think there's anything bad in what I'm about to say. So, Kay and I, we have been friends ever since high school days. He's one of my oldest friends and definitely one of my best friends. Like Kay and I, we are so close to each other that we actually have each other's like passport number and credit card number and all those relevant information. And we are okay with that because we trust that neither of us is going to do anything to harm each other's credit or reputation or anything like that. And because we help each other with businesses and work-related things so often, that it's actually just easier for us to have a copy of each other's ID and all that information so we can act without having to pick up the phone and say, "Oh, hey, what is your account savings account number?" and stuff like that. So that is how close Kay and I we are with each other. Um, One day, not so long ago, in fact, about maybe 5 months ago, Kay and I we sat down and had a couple of drinks, and then he started being a little bit thoughtful and pensive. And then he said, "Johnny, do you remember back when we were in our early 20s?" And I laughed and I said, "Yeah, dude, I totally do. I remember every detail back when we were in our early 20s. I was going to school, I was working part time, you were living at home with your mom, and you were driving a fancy sport car. You liked fast car at the time. You worked at a steel metal factory, and I remember that you didn't have a girlfriend for the longest time." He said, "Yeah, yeah, wasn't that crazy?" I said, "Yeah." And you know what else I remember? I remember that so often after work you would come and crash at my place because my place was closer to your work location. You would show up at my place with some takeout Chinese food and some video cassette. Yeah, we were old enough that we were still using video cassette at the time. VCR at my place, and you would crash in at my living room and watch TV. And sometimes we would drink, sometimes we would smoke cigarette, and most times we would talk. We would talk a lot. And then in the morning, I would have such a hard time waking you up and getting you out of my door so you could go to work and I could go to school. And he said, "Do you remember how sad I was at the time?" I said, "Yes." How can I forget that? You were kind of moping around and very sort of depressed most of the time, feeling that you had nothing in your life, feeling that you had no one to share with, no one to bond with. You used to say that if one day you could have a wife and a place of your own, and that you not living with your mom anymore, that would be just like paradise. You would save money and buy a house and have children. Kay is married now, living, him and his wife live in a place they rent mm, for themselves, no longer living with his parents, and they are in the process of having children or trying to have children. So it sounds like Kay is living his dream come true. But that night, after I recounted how depressed he used to be in our early 20s, how lost and confused and lonely he seemed to be, he put his hand on my shoulder. He said, Johnny, I never would have imagined that those days would turn out to be the happiest time of my life. If I can do things over again, I would rather be like that for the rest of my life. Right now, I live in hell. And that shook me. Not that I was surprised, because I knew that he has been very unhappy. Unhappy with work, unhappy with life, unhappy with marriage, unhappy with various responsibilities and pitfalls life has thrown in his path in this past 10 years. So this does not surprise me that he finds life so hard, but it shook me because I still remember so vividly how sad and depressed he was back in our early 20s. And it surprises me that he can say that those were the happiest time in his life. It flatters me a little bit because a lot of those times were him and I spending time with each other, uh, like best buddies, getting into crazy situations, solving crazy problems together. We were like comrade in arms, two Chinese Taiwanese immigrants. Well, he's Chinese, I'm Taiwanese. Though to a lot of people, there's no difference. Two immigrants alone in a foreign country where people really didn't give a bit of goddamn about those young guys, two guys fighting for their rights, fighting for what they wanted. Kay told me that back then he felt lonely, he felt sad, he felt depressed, but at least all the money he made were his. If he ran into a problem, he knew there wouldn't be any problem that him and I wouldn't be able to solve. And he had a dream. He had a goal. His goal was to one day find a nice woman to marry, one day to buy a house for his mom. Now that he's married, now that he's bought a house for his mom, he finds that his life is bleak and there's no goal, no dream, nothing worth looking forward to. Even the prospect of having children does not really thrill him because he's not really a kid's person. I remember very fondly back in our early 20s sometimes in the middle of the night, in the middle of the godforsaken night, like 1 in the morning, 2 in the morning, when Kay was staying over at my place, he would say, "Hey, I'm getting kind of hungry. Let's go find something to eat." And we would hop into his fancy little sports car and vroom vroom down the street to find some late night Chinese or Vietnamese restaurant. Back then, food were really, really cheap comparing to now. The two of us would be able to have a good late night meal for less than $20. That's for both of us. Heck, nowadays you can't even get a full meal for a person for less than $20 a lot of time. And after that, Kay would drive all the way to the airport and park there at the airport near the runway, watching the airplane coming and going. He liked airplane. He liked watching them. Not that he felt anything in particular toward the machines themselves, but he said in every one of these airplanes there are hundreds of hearts, hundreds of people. They are either happy that they'll see their loved one soon, or they're sad that they're leaving someone behind. In every one of these airplanes, there's hundreds of emotions, personalities going on. That was what intrigued him. That was what made him love airplanes and trains and buses so much. And so often, when we were sitting there looking at the airplanes, he would very wistfully say, "Man, I wish that one day I would have a wife and a place of my own, and how happy I will be then." Life is very ironic sometimes. Sometimes we think we want something. We think we don't want our current situation. Sometimes we think our current situation is the worst in the world. It's worse than anybody else. It's horrible. But then maybe 20 years down the road, when we finally achieved and accomplished our dreams, when things finally came true for us, we'll look back and realize just how ironic life really is.